In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, two brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, John Flack and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Hello and welcome to the Retro Movie Roundtable. I'm your host, Russell Guest, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, John Flack. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. And you know why I'm doing great? Because we have...
Why are you doing great?
I'm doing great because we have a great host today. One of my best friends, and one of your best friends, the great Chad Robinson is here. And horror movie aficionado, I might add. Chad, how are you?
Hi, everybody. That's some pressure. Thanks, Russell.
He set the bar for you.
Yeah, wonderful.
We knew with it being October, we had to call in the big guns or the big knives, or what have you, big sickles and other implements of horror destruction.
Excellent.
Yeah, we had to call in the experts here, not the Ghostbusters, but Chad. So, before we get kicked off into the actual movie, let's get to know Chad just a little bit here. Answer a couple questions for you. Chad, if you could remake any movie, what would you remake?
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Wow, okay. So you weren't happy with it?
I was not. Make Jar Jar Binks the bad guy. Make Anakin a teenager. Just fix it.
So a lot of changes.
Everything.
What about Darth Maul?
I kind of thought your change might be just not making it.
Yeah, that too. We can remake it as just nothing. Just cue A New Hope again. That's just fine.
What is your favorite date movie memory?
So my wife and I like very, very different movies. She's more of a romantic comedy person or a Disney person. I'm more of a slasher horror movie person. And to compromise one year, we decided to do a double feature. She wanted to see Cinderella, the live action. That was okay. And I wanted to see It Follows. That gave her nightmares, so I kind of won out on that date movie.
So, did you have nightmares?
She woke me up in the middle of the night telling me a man was standing in the doorway. Mm-hmm. And so she promptly went back to sleep when I said there's no one there. But I was up for like the next 6 or so hours.
6 hours?
Off of pure adrenaline. I mean, your wife wakes you up in the middle of the night saying...
Oh, so it wasn't just like a little nudge? No, it was terror-induced. This guy's going to kill us, and there's no one there. It freaks you out. Like when the little kids in horror movies say there's a monster in the room. You can't see it, but they can. Yeah, it was that. So, I know you're a big Halloween fan. What are some of your Halloween movie watching traditions?
I try every year to watch a movie for every day in October. So I'm trying to hit 31. Right now I'm keeping pace. Mostly trying to get new movies in, but some rewatches. Russell, we've started a kind of a mini marathon. I like showing you some of my favorites and maybe hit a new one or two if we can. But really, I just try and cover as much ground as I can over October. But I always have to hit up Halloween, Nightmare Before Christmas, and Gremlins. Those are my go-tos.
Yeah. So last year we did, as Chad mentioned, we've been doing this probably for about 4 or 5 years, maybe, where we do a triple feature. And usually one is not on the hard, scary side necessarily because, as mentioned... Sarah is not as big of a fan of the horror movies, nope. And she's usually present for at least one of them. So, what did we do last year?
We did Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which is an excellent comedy.
You had to make me watch it, and I loved it. I don't know. The title just didn't jump out at me.
Yeah, it's not a great title, but man, that movie's worth it. It's a lot of fun.
I think the title makes sense after you've seen the movie.
It does. I do have to protest the bad frat guy being named Chad. I don't know where that's coming from. I mean, come on.
It's a meme. I didn't know this until recently.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
kind of like a popular thing, like that. Because when I mentioned your name the first time down here in North Carolina, people were just like, "Chad is he a frat guy?" I was like, "No, no, absolutely not."
No, they won't let him in frats.
And the other two?
The Babysitter, which I think was a Netflix exclusive.
Yeah.
That was very, very good. The Babysitter is kind of a satirical movie where she is leading a cult, and they play on a lot of horror movie tropes. The characters are just ridiculous stereotypes. It's a lot of fun.
It's a comedy. It's funny.
Yeah. Yep.
And then
The new Friday the 13th, well, new in 2009, which in my opinion is the best version of Friday the 13th.
I second that opinion, to be honest with you. I'm not a lover of the first Friday the 13th movie, and this made some improvements, which isn't, in my opinion, hard to do, and I'm probably hurting some people's feelings by saying that, but
Interesting. I haven't even seen it.
I recommend it.
It's good. Danielle Panabaker, who is in Flash right now, she plays Killer Frost, and she is also in Piranha 3 Double D, which, despite the ridiculous name, is actually a fun movie.
Yeah. So, one last one. Have you seen any movies? What's the last movie you saw?
So the last movie I saw is not something that I would recommend to anyone. It was White Zombie. It starred Bela Lugosi back in the 1930s. It's considered probably the first zombie movie. They're very different than Romero zombies. They're basically just mindless slaves. It's not very scary or intimidating. It's just long and boring.
I didn't realize that Romero didn't actually come up with the zombie somehow. I perhaps gave him credit for inventing the zombie. So
He came up with the brain-eating trope that we have today.
The modern zombie, yeah.
The good version.
All right, that's fair. So let's get into today's movie. Today we're going to do John Carpenter's Halloween. This came out in 1978. It had a tiny little budget of $300,000. Its opening weekend, it made $8 million, so pretty profitable. It went on to gross $47 million domestic. It placed 8th in the box office on the year, which is pretty strong for a horror movie. Placing ahead of it was Hooper, and placing behind it was Convoy. IMDb rating gives us 7.8 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes critics meter gives us 93%, a very strong critics meter, and then an audience score of 83%. I'm not sure why that's a 10% swing there. That's a large difference. And then Ebert actually loved this one as well. So this movie is championed as being highly original and highly influential, and it spawned a series of 11 movies to come in the franchise, counting some remakes and sequels. So some are better than others. So let's ask Chad. Have you seen Halloween before? I think you said you had.
Of course.
When was the first time you saw it, and how did you feel about it, and how did you feel coming into it this time?
Oddly enough, the first time I saw Halloween was at a church lock-in. There wasn't much churchy things going on in the lock-in, but they did show a lot of horror movies. This was really the movie that kickstarted my love of horror movies. I'd seen The Howling 3 before. That's not great, but it was still, as a little kid, you're seeing a scary movie. It's fun. Halloween just stuck with me. Just the music, the imagery. I loved everything about it. I just had to get more and more horror movies.
Interesting. So how old were you at this lock-in?
Probably 11 or 12.
Okay. Yeah. How about you, John?
Well, when I first saw it, I was probably about the same age Chad was. I was probably about 11 or so. I caught it on TV, so it was definitely edited. And it's kind of interesting. I haven't seen it in quite some time. And honestly, as I grew older, all of the older Halloween movies all became kind of a jumble, with the exception of Halloween 3, because that was just a different one. And so I kind of forgot specifically like which characters were in which film, except for our main characters, that is. I really liked it, but then, as time goes on, it's one of the most referenced horror movies I can think of, honestly. I mean, there's lots of great ones out there, but I mean, the opening song, the theme song alone is everywhere. So I hadn't seen it in a while, as I mentioned. So I was kind of excited to revisit it, and I actually went out and made sure to purchase this one because I didn't have it. I figured it'd be a good addition. I got the 35th anniversary Blu-ray adaptation, and it looks really nice, and the sound looked a lot better. Converting the mono recording, trying to get it over to stereo, and I made sure to watch it in the dark and at nighttime, and I was not disappointed. Tried to come in with a clear mind, and I was happy I did.
Like John and Chad here, I watched this one. I got to it a little bit later than they did. I was probably 13 or 14. I'm going to say 13. And this really was my first sit down through a horror movie. I watched it on TV. I was home alone, and I just watched it on TV, and I somehow got hooked. I came in at the beginning, and I was like, I don't watch horror movies. I don't even like the idea of being scared from a movie. And somehow I picked the right one to walk in on and give the whole genre a chance. So it scared me a lot, but I enjoyed the thrill, and so it stuck with me. So I didn't really become a horror junkie at all. And then once my wife Mary and I started to simultaneously get into them together in college, we came back and revisited the entire Halloween series, starting at the beginning, going all the way through the end. That took us up through the first Rob Zombie movie. I actually hadn't seen the second Rob Zombie movie yet.
Don't.
I'll probably do it just as a completionist, but it's. Like I said, there's varying degrees of success through the series, but I enjoyed it, and I knew I loved it, and so coming back into this, I was excited. I don't buy tons of movies, but I bought this one. Unlike John, I probably made a bad investment, and I bought a DVD, and it was cheap, so it was probably cheaper, but on the other hand, I didn't realize it was a full-screen version, and it's a little slim on the features, so it had a couple on there, so. But anyway, love this movie, so. This is the part where I have to remind everybody that in order to talk about Halloween and have a good time, we're going to have to spoil the movie thoroughly. So there will be spoilers that lie ahead. This is your final opportunity to turn it off. But we recommend you go back, watch Halloween, and then come back and enjoy this episode and let us know what you think. So, Chad, do you want to take us away and give us a plot summary?
Sure thing. So Michael Myers is the embodiment of evil, even from the early age of 6 when he stabs his hot sister to death with a kitchen knife. After being locked up in an insane asylum for the past 15 years, Michael escapes due to an incompetent security staff and promptly returns to his hometown of Haddonfield to terrorize the residents. He brutally takes out his frustrations on unsuspecting horny teenagers while stalking babysitter Laurie Strode. Michael terrorizes Laurie inside the Doyle's house until his gun-toting psychiatrist, Dr. Sam Loomis, finally catches up to him and shoots him several times in the chest. Michael falls out the window onto the yard below. However, when Loomis and Laurie check the yard for the body, Michael has disappeared, allowing for a sequel because evil can never truly die.
Absolutely. Evil does not die. So, John, give us what are your thoughts on the plot here?
Chad, I think, nailed it about as much as we can without ruining too much of our discussion later. But, yeah, I think that's good.
Apparently, it was written on a book by Curtis Richards. I didn't realize this, and it's a very rare book, apparently, and it reveals a little more about Michael's rage in the book. Movie simplified things a little bit, and I'm kind of glad they did because Rob Zombie goes back into his remake and tries to show more. And I think there's another sequel, The Curse of Michael Myers. I think that one went a little better, but I think Michael Myers is just a blunt instrument of evil, expressionless.
Absolutely. John Carpenter said he should never be sympathetic.
Yeah, yeah, and so
He got the idea of Michael Myers partially from an experience in college where he toured a psychiatric facility and saw a kid and said he saw evil and he was truly terrified.
I think one of the other elements that this is something I've picked up on before that makes a good horror movie for me is your concern for children. So as Laurie's babysitting, as Chad mentioned in this one, that ups the stakes considerably as she's looking over one and then later two kids as her friend who is also babysitting takes the job less seriously and dumps another kid on her lap. So you're worried not only for her own safety but the ability to keep these two likable kids. Well, one's more likable than the other. Likable kids and keep them safe.
Well, they were great plot devices too because they introduced the concept of the boogeyman. Tommy Doyle was always asking about the boogeyman, and that is Michael Myers.
That's a good point. I actually hadn't realized they are very functional to the plot as well. So, and then another interesting component in this is Carpenter and Deborah Hill stated many times over the years that they just did not want to depict the virginity of the character, the wholesomeness of the character of Laurie Strode as a way of defeating the evil. It's just simply that the horny teens are preoccupied with other things and therefore make themselves more vulnerable to getting murdered.
Yeah, that's
because even when their friend is kind of saying, "Hey, there's someone out there," they don't notice there's a serial killer at large.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of accidentally created a trope where the female that gets undressed or is having sex or is doing drugs, she winds up getting axed. And so, yeah, Carpenter's had to come back and say, that wasn't what I was going for.
It's true.
Well,
I mean,
honestly, he's kind of gone away from any deep analysis. He said he just wanted to make a good horror movie.
And he did.
Because there are a lot of things that people have analyzed about this film and tried to, especially in a retrospective manner, tried to say it encourages or discourages certain things. And he's just like, I just wanted to make a good horror movie that was scary.
He did. And I think it's also interesting that it doesn't rely... Normally, I'm a big proponent of if you don't build good characters, then you generally don't have a very good horror movie. But this movie is also pretty simple with its characters. Laurie is just simply a teenager in a sleepy suburban town that's much like a lot of middle America lives in. And this could have happened anywhere. I think that's part of why it resonated so much with so many people. And obviously... there's a strong sense of her being vulnerable, but you don't really know her whole backstory. You don't really know everything about her. You just know that she's a quiet kid in school, not as popular as some of the other girls, and kind of introverted, and therefore not as much caught up in boys and the social scene. So,
bookish, you could say.
Yeah.
She complains she left her chemistry book.
So, John, you want to give us a rundown through the cast here?
Yeah, we'll just go with some of the main ones here. So we have Donald Pleasence playing Dr. Sam Loomis as the evil-obsessed psychiatrist of Michael Myers. Jamie Lee Curtis plays, as you said, the kind of meek teenager Laurie Strode, who seems to be a little less popular. Very kind-hearted, though. And then Michael Myers is played by actually 6 different people. We're only going to mention 3, but Nick Castle plays Michael Myers, or the Shape is often referred to, for the majority of the movie. Tony Moran plays the unmasked Michael Myers, and Will Sandin plays the 6-year-old Michael Myers from the beginning of the film. And PJ Souls plays our kind of sassy, ditzy friend, Linda Vanderclock. What a name. And Nancy...
I didn't know her last name.
Yeah. Nancy Kyes plays our other friend, Annie Brackett, who is also the daughter of the town sheriff, Sheriff Lee Brackett, played by Charles Cyphers. And then the 2 kids we mentioned before were Kyle Richards, played Lindsay Wallace, and Brian Andrews played, I think what Russell was mentioning, the more likable Tommy Doyle.
Yeah. Lindsay's just kind of a zombie and just like watches TV and like lets the whole world pass.
She
her by.
really is. It's horrifying.
Yeah, she's a little too under her TV. I don't know.
She answers the phone.
She
Yeah,
talks to John Carpenter, actually.
Yes, she does.
she does. You're right about that. But yeah, Tommy's a lot more likable. And so, one note, I was really surprised upon going back this time. You see something new every time. I forgot how much Nancy Kyes is in there, the character of Annie. She's actually in there a lot more than I remembered. Like I kind of had her about hierarchically as the same level of importance as Linda's character, but not. I didn't think that was the case. She has a lot more speaking lines, a lot more screen time.
Oh yeah, she has some of the best scenes in the movie, and she's actually a favorite of John Carpenter.
She's been in a number of Carpenter films,
Yeah,
including Assault on Precinct 13th, which was before this, I believe.
Absolutely, and The Fog later on.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, thanks for connecting some dots here. That's why we do this. I didn't put any of that together. So, one that I am going to put together is I got to give PJ Soul some credit. She doesn't necessarily blow you away with this performance, but her ability to pick really awesome projects is impressive. She goes from Carrie, Stripes, Rock and Roll High School, which she is the lead in, Breaking Away, which I love that movie, Private Benjamin. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if it's just she hit the wrong age or whatever, she starts to fade away and just go into TV movies and stuff like that. But her film career is resoundingly strong.
Well, if I read correctly, her role in Carrie is kind of what earned her this role. It's when they saw that, they wanted her.
She works her way into a lot of good movies. I'll point that out. So, so a few other thoughts about Jamie Lee Curtis. This is her first movie, and she's actually a teenager in this. She's the only one who actually is a teenager. The other girls are a little bit older, playing younger, which is something Hollywood always does, but at least Laurie is a little bit closer to the proper age for the role. However, I didn't pick up on that, did you?
Yeah, she actually looks older than the people that are actually 10 years older than her. Nancy Kyes is 10 years older than her.
I thought that too. Another fun one here is Donald Pleasence actually did all of his scenes in only 5 days. So the total duration of his time in the movie is 18 minutes.
18 minutes, yeah.
So, and Donald Pleasence told John Carpenter he didn't like the script, he didn't like the character, and the only reason he was doing this is because his granddaughter liked Assault on Precinct 13. But he later told them once he was friends that he was just testing the convictions of John Carpenter and was saying that he challenges all of his directors this way. He wanted to see how much he was really into this, as you could kind of gauge how much energy you wanted to put into there. Do you have any other thoughts on the cast here?
Well, to connect some dots like we did earlier, Jamie Lee Curtis, her mother is Janet Leigh, who was Marion Crane in Psycho. And I think John Carpenter had a big thing for Psycho. Sam Loomis was Marion Crane's lover in Psycho. He reuses that name. He uses the instrument for Michael Myers, the kitchen knife. So there's quite a bit of homage to Psycho.
That's a great one too. John, did you have any other thoughts on the cast?
Nothing more specifically, but actually on that thing of the Psycho is actually he used Psycho as more of an influence on this. I'm glad you mentioned that, Chad, because in Assault on Precinct 13, a lot of people didn't like that a major character or a major actor was killed so early in the film, and so he decided to take a much slower approach to this film, as kind of Psycho did.
And it works.
Yes.
So it's interesting to note Donald Pleasence, that was not necessarily the first choice to give the role of Dr. Loomis to. Christopher Lee actually turned it down and seemed to be the first choice, and Peter Cushing also turned down the role of Dr. Loomis. And there were a number of other considerations, according to the internet, which is never wrong. Other people linked to being considerations include Peter O'Toole, Stephen Hill, Walter Matthau, Jerry Van Dyke, Lawrence Tierney, Kirk Douglas, John Belushi, Christopher Lloyd, Lloyd Bridges, Abe Vigoda, Chris Christopherson, Sterling Hayden, David Carradine, Dennis Hopper, and Charles Napier. Yul Brynner and Edward Bunkner. So a lot of other names, many of whom are still familiar to this day. And
Well,
I just like Pleasence so much I can't see anybody else doing it.
well, from my understanding, Christopher Lee said it was one of his bigger regrets in his career was to turn down that role. But since you went ahead and mentioned Yul Brynner, I think it's important to note actually part of the concept of Michael Myers, as I mentioned before, because it wasn't just from one thing, was from Yul Brynner's robot character in the original movie of Westworld, an unkillable robot.
Another fun connection there. Let's talk about the director and the film creation here just a little bit. This is part of the big reason this movie is such a success is how much John Carpenter did with so little. So, as we mentioned before, with just $300,000, Carpenter did so much. John, do you want to take this one first and tell us what your thoughts on Carpenter are?
I mean, I wish we had basically a week to talk about him with this. I mean, the film is entirely based around him. I mean, he does everything for it. I mean, he got it off the ground, pitched it, was the one who just really and the more I read about it, the more he just really was the driving life behind it all. And you can tell he just really has a good love for it. And what amazes me is how quickly he did some of this stuff. It took him about 10 days to write the screenplay, or for the screenplay to be written, which is pretty quick for a movie that does so well and continues to live on so well. But and the music, which is so iconic, he wrote it all in just a few days. But he has so much control over it, and as you said, Russell, with so little, like having that small a budget, and you got to keep in mind half of the budget was spent on cameras, on Panavision cameras that were very high tech at the time. So really, with the rest of it, you were operating with $150,000, which isn't much considering your lead actor, Donald Pleasence, is only taking 18 minutes, as you mentioned, is getting paid $20,000 of it.
Right.
I mean, the mask
even for
cost
78,
them
that's not a lot.
$1.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mask cost $1. They and he had helped, and you got to give the actors credit too. Most of them provided their own wardrobes.
Yep.
Jamie Lee Curtis bought hers from J.C. Penney for less than $100, if I recall. But just he's really driving everything behind it.
Certainly is. Chad, what do you think Carpenter's bringing to this movie here?
I mean, John touched on the majority of it. He's just so central to the vision, to the drive of this movie, to everything. His genius is just on display. I did love this quote I found about John Carpenter because he's had some great hits that were mostly low budget, and then his high budgets, they haven't done as well for the most part. But this quote said, "Give John Carpenter $100,000, he'll make you a $20 million movie. Give John Carpenter $100 million, he'll still give you a $20 million movie."
That's funny.
That's a little bit of a backhanded compliment, but I guess restrictions sometimes do breed creativity. Yeah. And that's true in design, and that's true with direction as well sometimes. I mean, I'm thinking recently, one of my favorite movies that's come out in recent years is The Babadook. And it's, it was funded off Kickstarter. It's not got a lot of cast. It's done with low budget stuff, and it's phenomenal. And it reminds me, one of the reasons I have so much appreciation for it is similar to Halloween. It's just, the resourcefulness, and it doesn't show that it's low budget. So
yeah, Paranormal Activity was like $15,000, something like that.
Yeah, the first one of those is really good too, I think.
And Blair Witch, like it or hate it, it was low budget too. They actually returned the camera equipment to Circuit City after the movie was filmed.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd just like to say is you have to give him major credit for it. He seems to walk the fine line very well of he knows what he wants and what to do it, but he isn't against listening to other people's input and understanding maybe how something could be done a little bit better. But and maybe it's because we can see his whole body of work now, but some of those movies you're talking about, they didn't do well of his at first.
Let's run through the list real
cult classics.
Let's run through the list real quick here while you're on that. I mean, as you mentioned, in '76 he did Assault on Precinct 13. That's what fueled him to get this movie, and that helped give him the credibility, even as a young filmmaker, to do this. This movie comes along pretty quickly after a TV movie so this is 1978 for Halloween. Follows that up with a TV movie Elvis, The Fog in 1980, Escape from New York in 81, The Thing, which is one of my all-time favorites in 82, Christine, which actually The Thing is not well received, unfortunately. It's underappreciated. And so his career takes a little bit of a dip, and he has a hard time getting what he wants. And he goes and doing Christine, a Stephen King movie in 83, Starman in 84. 86, he does Big Trouble in Little China, and They Live in 88. And then he slows down a good bit. He comes back and revisits Escape from L.A. in 1996. He does a remake of Village of the Damned as well. That one didn't turn out too good, in my opinion. And Vampires in 98, and then The Ward was his last movie in 2010. Everybody hated that movie, but I like it. So I don't have too many criticisms for Carpenter through his entire body of work, through the ups and downs, minus Village of the Damned.
I just appreciate with Jamie Lee Curtis. So this movie was shot out of order, and Carpenter developed what he called the fear meter, the terror meter, and he would give her a separate level for, okay, you're at this level of scared right now. You're at a 5. You're at a 10. So that was really cool to listen to him talk about of developing this fear meter for her.
That's cool. That is. I mean, and like you said, she was an inexperienced actress, so I'm sure she definitely appreciated that.
But I guess one of the things I also like is it with a lot of these movies you're kind of mentioning, he's swinging for the fences, and you can tell he is. He's not looking to get a double. And honestly, a lot of the ones you mentioned, and I'd hate to say it, even Village of the Damned, maybe it was just Christopher Reeve, or Mark Hamill being in it. Some of these are guilty pleasures for me.
Big Trouble in Little China?
Big Trouble in Little... I don't even think that's a guilty pleasure.
I think it's well liked.
I think it's wonderful.
I think people like it. We could do an episode on that someday. I'm not saying that we're going to do it like next week, but it could happen someday.
I'm on board. No shame.
James Woods and Vampires. I loved it. Like him as a leather-dressed vampire hunter. I saw it in theaters as a kid. I'm not going to lie. It's a guilty pleasure.
So I think it's one of the really cool things Carpenter said about Halloween. He said this was just a really fun movie to make. He said if you make a horror movie, everybody on the cast is having a fun time. If you make a drama or a comedy even, he said people are very stressed out. People argue more. People are very serious. And there's a lot of consternation about it. But he said Halloween was genuinely a fun movie to make for him, for Deborah Hill, and the cast around him. So I think when people are having fun, I'd like to think that shows through with I think that yields a better product. And so you can tell when he talks about a lot of his other projects that he's pretty critical of his own work. Like he has a pretty high standard, but you can tell for what this did for his career that he holds this one in his heart. I think he views this as his best movie, and I haven't heard him say that, but just judging off of how he speaks, and I might agree. What do you think? Is this the top of the hill for you?
This is the gold standard for horror movies for me. So yeah, I mean, I love The Thing, but this Halloween is just the top of the hill for me.
John, top notch for you?
It's up there. I have to give a little caveat that I think that there's different types of horror films, but encompassed in this genre, especially having a quote unquote slasher feel to it, yeah, it's definitely the top. Because while I think The Thing is kind of a horror movie, I think it's also science fiction.
Yeah.
And so you're a little bit apples and oranges there. But I mean, I liked Nightmare on Elm Street. I liked Friday the 13th, but this is actually, in my opinion, well above those.
One of the things I got to point out that he did with his camera work, as John mentioned, a large part of the budget went into the camera. They had these cameras that, and forgive me, I don't have the name on me right now, but they are strapped onto the actual cameraman. They're really heavy. But these first-person angle shots that they take, like in the opening scene of the movie when you see young Michael Myers approaching the Myers house, as you see Laurie walking up the steps later in the movie, as you see Michael following Laurie, these moving single frame shots, or sorry, not single frame, but these moving shots that appear to not have a lot of cuts in them, Some cases they do, but there's not a lot of cuts where they're actually following, and you're getting that motion of the camera. It's and paired with the music, it's very eerie, and that just sets the mood so well. So again, they spent that money on the camera, and there's a reason they did that, so that you can get the movement and the feel of that first person thing. I mean, even in the beginning of the movie, they put a mask over the camera, and you see the eye slits.
Yeah, and that was a late addition. They didn't do it in the original cut, so that was I think it was Deborah Hill that suggested it, but it was a wonderful addition.
That is a good suggestion.
And those cameras were Panavision cameras.
Thank you. I knew it was out there somewhere. I didn't make it to my notes, so Panavision.
So they would have a 2.35 to 1 scope.
That's yay.
Those are numbers.
Ratio. If you worked in a movie theater, you know the difference between scope and. But you were talking about, hey, you had to have a different screen on your DVD. That's why I went ahead and got the copy I did, because you got to look at your ratios.
Yeah, well, I'll probably be selling my copy at some point, and.
Dr. Sidney Pollack taught me about pan and scan and how awful it was.
This is one of those movies I like so much I'll probably buy twice because I'm not pleased with. I cheaped it up too much because it's like, wow, $9 for a new copy? Great. Bad.
And you'll probably be telling the story in 30 years about how you still bought the bad copy and you're kicking yourself for it.
It's possible. Who knows? Maybe we'll have a contest and I'll get rid of it somehow to a lucky listener. We'll sign it. It'll be worth something.
Autographed with a nice note that says "worst purchase ever."
It's gonna be a pain in the butt to mail it down to John in North Carolina and then and then mail it from there. We do the show in different locations, so maybe Chad will just forge your name for you because he's here in Pittsburgh with me.
How do you spell Flack?
PH. So yeah, I thought it was another interesting thing where Carpenter really wanted the blankness of the character. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but he did not want to make Michael Myers relatable for the audience. And again, he's this unstoppable force.
You hear that, Rob Zombie? Not relatable. Don't need the childhood.
Man, I don't know. I don't have time to go into all the things wrong with the Rob Zombie movie. I'm trying not to go down that well because I get a little bit mad. I get a little bit of steam coming out of my ears right now.
Let's steer out of the dark.
Stick to the music.
But yeah, no, it's definitely. I think it was a great move to do that, to make it, and it's done so well. And I think that's why Donald Pleasence really nails it with that when he's telling his assistant, he hopes he never gets out, and he's going to put him on Thorazine, which, if you're aware of any drugs, that basically just puts you into a coma, and he just wants to make sure that he is not getting out.
I love that part in the beginning. I forgot about that part, but in the beginning, the nurse is talking to him as if he's not compassionate about his patient, and she's like,
and he does come off that way at first, but yeah. So
she's like, "What's your problem?" He referred to Michael as a thing, and then she's like, "You don't want him to get out?" And he goes, "No, never. Yep. Never, ever, never."
7 years trying to make sure that he doesn't get out. Yeah.
And then he spent 8 trying to get through to him, but just didn't. And then I like when he's telling the sheriff later, he's like, "I watched him stare at a wall for 15 years, not seeing the wall, but being inhumanly patient." And I thought that was a really good line.
Looking beyond the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's another good line that he had in that early portion there as well, where she's like, "Why are you taking him there then?" And he goes, "It's the law. I have to." But I don't agree with it. And so, and man, that opening scene really that just creeped me out so much too, with the patients running around. So I mean, he puts you on edge right at the beginning of the movie. The jack-o'-lantern with the title credits are rolling. The young first person of Michael Myers murdering his sister, and who I didn't know was topless. I think I've seen this every time on TV, and
she was actually a Playboy centerfold.
I did not realize that.
Yes.
Yeah. Clearly, they do some creative cropping or blurring or something on the TV version, and Anyway, and then they go directly into this scene where, Loomis is approaching the hospital complex where Michael's detained. And I mean, when I thought about it, I was like, man, he has hit you with a lot of stuff early. Like, he's got you on edge. He's keeping you there. And so when he slows the pace down, as you mentioned, the pace isn't super high. He's given you a good shakeup for the first quarter of this movie, I'd say.
Yeah, they said they were going for a scare every 10 minutes, and I don't know that it particularly achieves that goal, but there's certainly just tension and, like you're saying, almost relentless atmosphere throughout this entire movie. Just the musical cues, Michael Myers' appearances, appears behind a car or a bush or...
oh man, that bush thing still... I remember when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh my gosh!
The clothesline scene. Yeah, that is just excellent.
Yeah.
And I saw something somewhere. This is an interesting thing. Apparently in that bush scene, and I really looked for it, and it kind of looks like it, but apparently you can see John Carpenter's cigarette smoke popping up behind it.
Yeah, I saw that
if
too.
you look carefully. And I was like, huh. And so I went back and went to that scene. I really looked. I'm like, there's definitely a haze. I can't guarantee that smoke. I don't know if it was edited or whatnot, but it'd be interesting to see that Carpenter was right there and that into it, to be having a cigarette at the same time.
It seems like he's smoking in every interview I've ever seen, so I seems very believable. Any other thoughts on the director or how the film was created? Or do you guys want to talk about atmosphere or any other thoughts on the creation?
Well, I think you nailed it, Russell, with the point of making the movie fun. Jamie Lee Curtis is on record of saying she does not like horror movies. But when you hear her talk about Halloween, she just says it with a smile, and she talks about Shapey, that's what she called the actor that played Michael Myers, or the Shape. She seems to have a real friendship. There are pictures of her with Shapey. She just seems to have had a fun time, and that's really important for what was a 19-year-old at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, when you like what you're doing, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to do a better job of it. So, I mean, if you make me, I'm an architect, and if you make me sit there and design, the most mundane thing ever, a giant box with no windows or something like that, I'm not going to have fun with it. But, same thing. I mean, if you're engaged and you like what you're doing, you're going to produce better work. That's always the case. So...
Well, it's kind of funny, that you're talking about everyone having fun, because I saw a picture and doing some reading about this of Nick Castle playing Michael Myers, and he's got the mask over kind of on his head, but he's just got a drink in his hand and he's making a goofy face and smiling. And it's just like, I didn't think I could ever kind of laugh at a Michael Myers thing, but that was it. Like, he genuinely looked like he was enjoying what he was doing.
He's pretty funny in interviews and the behind the scenes footage. So, I bet he was fun. I bet he was fun to work with. So, last week, as we said, I said let's go to Haddonfield, and apparently, as you guys have both correctly pronounced it this way, it is Haddonfield. I've been saying it wrong for 15 years now. So, I guess I know better now. So this takes place in Haddonfield, Illinois, which is actually a fictional town. This is not a real town in Illinois, but there is a Haddonfield, New Jersey. But this is actually not shot in Illinois, for that matter. It's actually shot in South Pasadena in Hollywood. So in early spring, I might add, not October. So the crew actually was doing things like picking up paper leaves and dropping them around the neighborhood. And because budget was so scarce, they'd sit there and go back and pick up the prop leaves and put them in a garbage bag and then, use them again in another scene.
I love that mental image of just crew picking up painted leaves after every shot. That's just a ridiculous thing to think about nowadays with the big budget Marvel movies and things like that coming out.
Well,
apparently they had a hard time finding pumpkins too.
Yeah.
It wasn't fall.
That's a good point, actually. Have you ever tried to buy a pumpkin in March?
I have not, but it's one of my chief complaints. So the stabbing sound that you hear is actually them stabbing a watermelon. And I really feel like it'd be appropriate if they were stabbing a pumpkin, but I think part of the problem was they could only find like 3 or 4 for the movie because they had to break one.
They did, and that was a legit pumpkin. That wasn't a cardboard pumpkin. So, you're right. I don't know where they imported that pumpkin from. Like, if you're a pumpkin farmer and you're trying to sell like pumpkins, you're like, wait, you want one? Great.
I just wonder who said, like, spring is a really great idea to do this. Like, why can't you just wait till fall?
I don't know. But this movie is set at its current time in '78, but it's also set in 1963. So the movie opens up in a flashback when Michael was younger, and so it's a 15-year gap between that Michael is in the institution, and obviously a lot's changed in 15 years, and the world's forgotten about him. I think that's an interesting point because when this takes place, they don't take it very seriously that he's out. Even the people who are technically detaining him or responsible for him don't seem to take it seriously as his own doctor does. But Loomis knows. So, John, any thoughts on the feeling or of the setting here?
I kind of liked what you touched on. I liked when they're exiting, when Dr. Loomis is about to leave the institution, and he's just like telling us, like, I've tried to tell everybody. Like, you can just tell nobody's listening to him. They're like, oh, Haddonfield's 150 miles away. I think that Pleasence helps drives that urgency. And actually, it's a neat-looking hospital, which I believe was in Southern California. But I agree with you what you mentioned before, Russell. At least for me, one of the creepier parts of the movie is when Dr. Loomis and his assistant are pulling up and see all those patients wandering around, because you can't see them that well.
No.
And it's just that, like, it really puts the mood. That scene, like, put the whole mood on the like that little atmosphere. You can't see very far in front of you. It's stormy. You can just see part of a broken gate, and then even just him hopping over the car and breaking the glass puts you on edge right away.
Did you would you say that you knew you were in Southern California, or were you convinced that you were in the sleepy suburbs of the Midwest, Chad?
Well, you can see palm trees in the background if you pay enough attention.
I haven't noticed them, to be honest with you. I've heard that you can, but I just get too sucked into the movie.
Get the Blu-ray copy. You'll find them.
Oh, they cut those out in the widescreen.
They
it's
do.
The palm trees at the edge.
They do. It's the one advantage to the $2.50 DVD. But no, I mean, really, you have to be really looking for it. You're right. You get sucked into the atmosphere, and I just buy it as middle of nowhere, Illinois.
Yeah, and it feels like it. And actually, it's actually kind of an expensive place to live because that part of California is expensive. But in the end, it's convincing as a middle-class neighborhood. So, and it's interesting, the Myers house, which they worked in, was actually an abandoned house. And in order to do the Myers house flashback, they put wallpaper up, they painted it, and ended up having to basically strip it back down and retrash it again for later scenes. So I thought that was an interesting piece of set design that they had on that. So, John, did you have any thoughts on the wardrobe, maybe?
I kind of mentioned before, I found it interesting, first off, that the wardrobe was financed a lot by the actors buying their own clothing, which is, I have to give major credit to everyone on that. Sometimes to make a great movie, it means everyone's got to get their head in the same place. And, especially if you're a first-time actress like Jamie Lee Curtis, and especially in '78, $100, probably a fair amount of money to spend on it. But I think my favorite thing about it is the fact that the infamous mask is actually Captain James Tiberius Kirk.
It was a $2 mask.
Yeah, for like nothing. They just ripped off the eyebrows, teased up the hair, like
it was different hair.
The mask a little bit. Yeah, like they did some stuff to it, and Shatner didn't know it for a long time.
Yeah.
But he was honored apparently when he found out. But just being resourceful like that, because they apparently considered Nixon. They considered the clown mask, but they tested something and it was too creepy.
Rob Zombie.
And yeah, it's like, and I agree. Like the clown mask, what they came up with is, I mean, honestly, it's one of the most iconic. I mean, like in horror movies, of any mask or even just character. I mean, and just using basic coveralls of a mechanic. Like, I started wondering. I was like, where does Michael Myers find all these coveralls? Like, this, he's always got them.
It contributes to him being a very blank slate, though, as well. It's
absolutely perfect choice. Like, but it's not expensive. You know, it's nice and easy. And you know what? They're made to get dirty. That's it. Like,
And so they shall when he's wearing them.
I am so glad they didn't use the clown mask though, because then, it maybe have been affected later on and to a lesser degree, but I still like the movie Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
I haven't seen that one, but
You know what? It's dumb, but it's fun. You would think they'd run out of clown jokes, but they're pretty pretty well spread out throughout the movie.
I think we've talked about it, but I want to go into a little bit more. The score is just so important in this movie. What does the music do for you in this movie, Chad?
Well, I can't believe they had a test screening and a female fan complained there was practically no music. And so John Carpenter, like John mentioned earlier, he went back and he added in this music in 3 days.
She said it wasn't scary.
Yeah.
The movie, like she complains that this isn't very good.
Yeah, just the musical cues, that iconic theme song. I mean, I can't separate the two. It's just so important to the mood, to the tension, to everything that John Carpenter is trying to accomplish here. He nails it.
He does, and it's not a complicated thing. It's what it is though is it's a 5/4 time signature, and he played some harmonics, and it is very eerie, and that rhythm is not 4/4 time signature. 4/4 is what almost all of your run of the mill songs are going to be, so it's very familiar. It goes in the ear. It sounds good, but this is off kilter, and it gets you off kilter, and so. He composed and fully improvised the score in just 3 days. Again, like John said, fast turnaround. But he made the changes and said that he made some alterations to the movie and then showed it to another test audience, of which some of the people were the same. And the response was completely different. People were scared. People said, this is good. This is really good. And you've made a lot of changes. And he went on to say, I really didn't make that many changes. I put some music in. And so... yeah, John, what does this iconic score do for you?
It does everything for me. As you know, Russell, I love film scores, and I often have to make sure people, when I'm talking to them about movies, when they refer to a soundtrack, that they're talking about songs that were original scores for the movie, or, there's only really one other musical score that I can think of that puts me on edge or creeps me out as much like that. And honestly, it's Jaws.
Yeah, I was thinking Jaws.
Yeah, it's the only other one that kind of, and it has that same uneasiness feeling. And I love science fiction films, and you can kind of tell Carpenter takes a lot of his, because he likes the keyboard, clearly. He said he can play pretty much any keyboard. He said he just can't read or write music. Which I find funny, but he doesn't seem full of himself on making the music, and is able to do it seamlessly, really. But in this movie, I think it makes all the difference. I mean, just those opening credits, when you first hear that, like, it's just, I wouldn't have known the 5/4 time or 10/8, whatever you referring to. See, I'm
numbers
like
again, ratios,
Music theory,
nerd stuff.
I can't read or write a note, and I can't play the keyboard.
We're throwing all the pretentious numbers that are people today.
And I love that he refers to it as the Bowling Green Philharmonic Orchestra.
Wow, that's a little bit dark.
Yeah, it's like, well, he likes to throw out Bowling Green there. That's where he's from. It's he likes to say that. I mean, and he did have some help from Dan Wyman, a music professor at San Jose State, but it really just makes the whole movie. I would have agreed, honestly, had I screened it. Like, I don't think it would have been nearly as creepy. If you put this movie on and just removed that entirely, I don't think I would have even remembered it, honestly.
No, that's fair. And another one that I wanted to mention is even Michael's car is a blank slate. It's this fairly generic tan, station car that and forgive me, I'm not a car guy. I don't actually know the exact model. But it also is very blank and generic. It can be concealed, and you can it just blends in. And I actually think it's interesting that it's with him as he's going to all of these scenes, whether it be where he goes to murder Annie, whether it be when Loomis is actually talking to Annie's father, who's the sheriff in town outside of the hardware store that he had robbed earlier. And Mary pointed this out. There's kind of a scene where it hesitates on just Loomis standing there. And it seems like a little bit of a loose end, but it's not. The car that drives down the street in the background is Michael's car again. And again, it was so generic. I've seen this movie so many times that I didn't notice it until this time. And Mary pointed it out to me, my wife. So that car itself is just another part of the terrifying blank slate that could be any car. So
My understanding, it was a rental car, and the rental agency didn't even know they were using it. They were just told, go get the most official looking car you could. I was trying to look through it. I believe it was Ford. I was trying to find it in my notes. Can't seem to locate it, but I did know that I found it funny that the rental agency had no idea that it was being used for that purpose. But
let's see.
It'd be a good advertising technique, honestly.
Yes.
We provide serial killers with cars too.
Oh, no. I thought I'd stumbled on it, but I found it's a 1978 Ford LTD wagon.
Okay.
So, there you go for all the car people out there. I've done you justice.
I'm racking my brains. I can't really think of many other horror movies where you actually see the killer driving. Yeah, sometimes you'll see them like jump in a vehicle, but this actually had Michael Myers behind the wheel just driving, following his victims.
Which is really an interesting kind of plot point because he's been in an asylum since he was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of Halloween fans have had. I mean, there's funny theories and interesting theories, and I think one came out in a movie sort of that he just observed Loomis when he was being transported very carefully. But
that's actually from the original book. So I had read that some people do criticize that as like, why can he drive? And the original book, again, that had more development that Carpenter wisely decided not to use too much of. They said that, Michael would be shipped from place to place before or from exercise to exercise, and Loomis would drive him around, and he had just simply watched Loomis drive. And in fairness, if you were a 10-year-old, couldn't you have figured out how to drive a car yourself? I mean, have a little bit of hard time reaching the pedals, but obviously he's a full-grown man now, so that's not much of an issue. You turn left, it goes left.
He was
right.
probably stick shift in the 70s, though.
But he drives it out of the place pretty proficiently, and I like how Loomis even said it. The man he was talking to said, "How do you know he can't even drive a car? How do you think he can get there?" It's like, "Well, he was doing really well last night." Like, and it's just like, and I think it really drives the point home that Michael Myers is like, he is crazy, not stupid. Like, he's totally insane, but not an idiot.
I think it's time to go into look for this. John, do you have any look for this moments? Or hit me with one. We'll go in a circle here, one at a time.
Well,
a couple.
Yeah, honestly, there's just so many of them. And we've touched on a few of them, really. But I wanted to say that, and I think we kind of mentioned before, but John Carpenter does make a cameo as Paul talking on the phone, being Annie's boyfriend to Lindsay, Russell's least favorite child, maybe ever, but which I like that, he was able to get himself in there. And
I just think Lindsay's parents need to unplug her from the TV from time to time. That's all I'm saying.
I agree. Definitely.
Chad, look for this.
Worth a note. But I have one more, actually.
Wait. We'll come back around.
Have one. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Chad.
So, sticking with the driving theme for me, Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult is playing in the background while Annie and Laurie are driving. Michael's actually following them.
That's a good song. I like that one. Michael Myers was actually named after the European distributor for Carpenter's previous film, Assault on Precinct 13. So actually, Michael Myers was actually a real guy's name. Kind of an odd thing to do for a guy you actually like. I'm going to name a serial killer after you, and everybody's going to think of you as a murderer. So, John.
I'd just like to note that the film the children are watching, at least one of them, was The Thing from Another World. And a few years later, John Carpenter would go on to direct The Thing.
Oh, that is perfect. Yeah, good one on that one. Chad, you got another one?
So the kid that played young Michael Myers, Will Sandin, I believe was his name, he winds up being a police officer. He didn't go into film at all.
In Los Angeles, I believe.
Yeah.
One of the more dangerous cities. Maybe if you learn about crime as a kid, you learn to fight it.
So we talked about Rob Zombie's love of Halloween, despite the fact that he didn't do a very good job of remaking it later in 2007. But the audio clip of the bullies, the three bullies who are picking on Tommy, of saying, "He's gonna get you, the boogeyman is coming." That's actually in the beginning of White Zombie song, "I'm Your Boogeyman." And so he actually inserts that sound clip from the movie into his song, which is something he's done a little bit of here and there. So, John, you got another one?
No, I think I touched on most of the other ones I'd like to.
Any other fun ones, Chad?
Last one for me, Jamie Lee Curtis improvised the song she's singing while Michael's following of, I think it was like Just the Two of Us, not the one you're thinking of, but
yeah.
But she completely improvised and made up that song.
That makes sense. They didn't have to pay rights for anybody's lyrics.
There you go. I didn't think of that.
Walk, walk, walk all day long.
Yeah, just
walk, walk, walk while I sing this song.
Just hum something.
Yeah. And then my last one is, originally in the script, Dr. Loomis was having a surprised reaction after the Michael Myers body that had fallen off the balcony in the end was missing. Pleasence actually read the script and went and talked to Carpenter, and he asked him, he said, now, I'm reading this, do you want me to do it as I'm surprised? It doesn't really say, or should I do it as in I knew this would happen, kind of a reaction? And Carpenter is like, ooh, that's good. I like that. What do you think we should do? And even in asking the question, he knew. And so Carpenter, another example of John saying he works with the people he's working with and takes good ideas. He leaned on a pro of Donald Pleasence on this one, and they did it with Donald Pleasence has this, remorseful face of like, oh man, I knew this was going to happen. And so, sure enough, it happened. He gets up at the end and he's gone. So, which goes on to be a reoccurring theme for another 11 movies or 10 movies. So, let's ask, how did this movie affect you? Chad, you want to take this one first? I mean, you clearly talked about how it started or kindled your love affair with horror movies, but when you watch this movie, how does it make you feel?
It's still, I've probably seen it a dozen or more times. It's still nerve-wracking. It's tense. I get absorbed into the atmosphere, and honestly, the look on Linda's face when Laurie finds her in that closet, that stuck with me from childhood. That's the scene that it was seared into my memory.
She looks like she's really crammed in there.
Yeah, and she has this look of horror on her face. I mean, she just got strangled to death, so there's that. But it kindled a love of the genre for me. It made me want to go out and see more movies like it.
Annie's body on the bed with a headstone on it probably rattled you.
Judith Myers.
Yeah, that was pretty creepy.
That's all just bam, bam, bam. You run into is it Paul that's hanging from the ceiling?
That one was a little bit sillier, but I mean, Annie's body that he kills his first victim, he lays out on a bed with a headstone of his dead sister from 15 years ago, who he also murdered, and stole the headstone, sticks it on the bed in front of her dead body, and lays it on somebody's bed. That just, whew.
And that just goes to show you how strong Michael Myers is, too.
Yeah,
that he's just
otherworldly. With the headstone.
Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
Oh, no, that's fine. It's just, I love this movie. I watch it almost every year, and I'll keep watching it every year.
Absolutely. And John, how does this movie make you feel?
Well, I mean, it's truly terrifying, and I enjoyed kind of reading some about the reviews, and apparently the late critic Gene Siskel said it scared him so much that he took a cab home after seeing it, and he lived 2 blocks from the theater.
Oh man, that's
in
good.
Fairness, I think he was a Chicago critic, and this in theory takes place in Illinois, but he was a local guy.
But even more, he looked in the shower specifically before he took one when he got home. He made sure to look before he did any, he said he was that frightened by it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's just, as we mentioned, I mean, from the music from the onset, it's just, it's got a really suspenseful, fright to it. But honestly, one of the more, memorable moments for me is when Laurie is running around trying to get help, and she literally goes up to a house and pounds on the door, and someone looks out the window.
Oh yeah, my heart's thumping.
And then just turns off the light. I was just like, ouch, like.
No, go away. We
like,
already
nice,
have cookies.
Yeah, it's like this is supposed to be like nice suburbia. Like if there's a woman blood curdling screams of help, like I'd like to think someone would at least open the door and see what's going on.
Harold, who was that? It's just the Jehovah's Witnesses again. I turned the light off. They don't know we're home.
I just wonder if the pranks had gotten out of control in that street or what had happened. Because you're right, John. It's like scared woman beating on your door screaming for help. And they're like, nah.
We already have given away all of our candy. Go away. It's like, please, I'm getting murdered out here. I don't care what murdering's happening. I don't care how scary your costumes are. I have no more Reese's peanut butter cups. Go away.
Well, and I can't, and it's probably John Carpenter and like the idea of having that fear meter, as mentioned before, and Jamie Lee Curtis portraying it so well. After that happens, she seems kind of hopeless and just so desperate. Like, you just really feel for her in that moment. At least for me, it really sticks with me.
This one reminds me of a time when I would be perhaps home on my own. My folks would go away, and I'm in the middle of a completely safe cul-de-sac in sleepy Charleston, West Virginia. It's nothing too threatening, super low crime rate. But it seems cool at first during the day, but sometimes I'd have these weird moments at night where I'd be like, "Oh, I'm home alone." And at that point in your life, you're never alone really in a house, and you're just like, I don't feel safe. And perhaps this movie actually puts that little bit of chill in you, and you're not sure if Michael Myers is going to be standing across the street in a tan Ford wagon, ready to target you, because maybe you dropped a key on his doorstep, because that's how he targets her. I think, right? Is that all he does to get on her list? I mean, get her on his list.
Depends on the sequel.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Time for my favorite part, guys. You ready for some superlatives?
Absolutely.
Chad, I'm going to give you the first crack at this MVP.
I'd like to think I was going out of the box, but I think this is going to be a popular selection for this particular movie. It's got to be John Carpenter. Without his score, without his direction, you guys mentioned it. People were bored. People weren't scared. Just what he injects into this film makes it one of the golden standards of horror movies, of the slasher genres. It makes it terrifying, and it just makes it so memorable and enjoyable.
Absolutely. John, MVP.
Yeah, I had a feeling there might be a clean sweep on this one. I don't think you can pick anybody other than John Carpenter for most of the reasons Chad just said. It's just he is the heart, soul, and really the mind of this whole film. There's a lot of great contributors outside of him, but without him, none of this gets off the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to make it a clean sweep. John Carpenter is for me. We've been singing his praises all night, so I'm going to ask Chad at this point, best supporting actor.
He didn't even have a speaking role, but honestly, for me, it's Will Sandon. Just that one gaze he gives when his mask is pulled off, you really do believe that this 6-year-old kid has just started on a journey of irredeemable evil.
It sticks with you. I remember that kid's face, and you're right, he's in there for like 7 seconds.
Yeah.
If that. So.
Well done, kid.
Yeah. Chad doesn't even normally like kid actors. So.
I do not. Please don't include them in most movies, but this one, yep, good job.
Are we on the same page with Lindsay?
Yeah, she's pretty dull.
Yeah.
I could do without her.
Yeah. Okay. John, best supporting actor.
I'm gonna have to go with. Is it Nancy Kyes? Is that what you all?
That's how I read it. Kyes.
We're sorry for mispronouncing your name, but I think she does a great job of being not just totally stereotypical teenager, because she's got some moxie.
Spunky. Yeah, she's spunky.
She's got something extra to her, like not just ditzy or bookish or anything like that. I think she really is one of the more enjoyable supporting roles in this.
I'm gonna follow you up on that one and pick Nancy Kyes as well as Annie. She does a lot to advance the plot of this movie. I mean, if you take her out of this, a lot of it suffers, and it's a very important role to get right. And I would even debate that it's probably the third most important role next to Laurie and Loomis. So I pick her as well. Hidden gem, somebody that you might not pay attention to, but or is underappreciated. Chad.
For me, it's Deborah Hill. She actually puts on the Michael Myers get up at one point because there just wasn't anyone else around. But she wrote all of the female dialogue. And so that's what helps the movie become relatable. They're not all, as you pointed out, just ditzy or incapable.
You hear that, Rob Zombie?
These females, they're capable for the most part. Jamie Lee Curtis is not a helpless victim. Annie has some substance to her, and most of their conversation feels really natural.
Agreed. John, hidden gem.
Well, interestingly enough, I stuck with the cast, and I was going with Will Sandon because, really he didn't go on to have an acting career, but yes, that simple look he had when they take the mask off and zoom out, and as the parents step back, I just thought, I was like, you know what? For a kid like that to nail something like that took a lot.
My hidden gem, I'm going to go with somebody kind of got caught in the gray area between supporting actor and hidden gem. I just want to give a nod to Charles Cyphers, who played Sheriff Lee Brackett. I did like him a good bit, and he makes a lot of good moments in the movie. But my hidden gem, I'm going to give to a very small role. Arthur Millay, the graveyard keeper, who actually is walking Loomis out to the graveyard, and just like, dumb kids, always stealing these grave headstones. To which I wonder, who are these teenagers in this town?
How often does this happen?
Yeah, he makes it seem so normal. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. He's not in a lot of other movies, but he was just so eccentric, which a graveyard keeper ought to be a little bit eccentric. And so...
Well, and you can tell he just keeps going, even though Loomis, you could clearly tell, is like, just shut up. Like, Loomis is just like, just show me the dang gravesite. Like...
Well, when I went back and watched it this time, for some reason I forgot about the headstone thing, and they looked at the hole in the ground. I was like, are they implying that this is a grave? It's very, very small. And then I realized they zoomed out. I was like, oh, that's right, it's a headstone. I thought there was like, the miniature grass on this looks terrible. That grave's about 3 inches deep.
Is this a grave for ants?
Best shot of the movie, Chad.
For me, there's really two. The closet scene with Laurie and Michael, it's very claustrophobic. The lighting changes. He turns on and off the light bulb. He's just trying to get into the closet. It's very intense, and there is practically no dialogue there. And it's just wonderfully shot. The other one for me, though, is her trying to get back into the Doyle's house. She's banging on the door for Tommy and Lindsay to come downstairs. They're asleep, and you see Michael just slowly approaching.
And you see the camera pan with her as she comes onto the porch, too.
Absolutely.
So there's a sense of movement, like you're watching this yourself.
Yeah, and the tension there is just palpable. You see him slowly doing that killer walk, and she's just pleading for help, and you're like, someone please answer the door this time.
I don't suggest anybody be a serial killer, but if you choose to take it up, I mean, walking slowly towards your victim is far more terrifying than like running after them. So take the slow approach. It's like the Heinz 57 of murder. Just kill your victim slowly. I mean, again, serial killing, bad thing. Retro Movie Roundtable does not endorse serial killing. But if you do it slowly. John.
This might seem like a little bit of a cop-out, but I got to go with the opening scene. I just think that the fade in from the credits, how that was done, and then just this interesting camera, like point of view shot, just really, and then winding out, as I kind of mentioned, with, us being unmasking, and you can just see picking up the clown mask and the knife, and you get this point of view from the perspective of evil, and you can't understand it, and that's kind of the point.
I was convinced that was one continuous shot, but apparently it's three.
Yeah.
3 shots. But yeah, that is it's convincing enough to me to count it as one. So I'm with you, John. Yeah, that definitely is a great one. So and then just to be diverse, I'm going to pick this one. Another one where Michael is about to come out at Laurie and stab her. He's in a dark part of the house, and then they fade up the blue lights on his face. And so you see this face kind of emerge, and then you understand where his position is, and she's facing away from him. And so again, another example of how you're just like so much tension, like, turn around.
It's right after the line, "You can't kill the boogeyman." Just wonderful foreshadowing by Tommy Doyle.
He's right.
Yeah.
He's a very insightful kid. Tommy, I like that kid. Lindsay, not so much.
You just like him because he was Paul Rudd later on.
Best scene, Chad.
I think it's the scene with Annie in the laundry room / like outdoor shed type area where Michael's bouncing from window to window. He never actually acts on that, but just...
He's thinking about it.
Yeah. You see his face behind her, and then she turns to talk to Lindsay. She's trying to get out the locked door, and he's just circling the shed, circling his victim, almost playing with her.
Yeah, that's a great one. There's a good shot too of him, like another mentionable shot of how the door closes, and through the sheer window, you kind of like the sheer window covering, you see his face all of a sudden there. So very alarming. John, best scene.
Well, interestingly enough, I chose for the shot the beginning, and I have to go with the end here. And part of it is, I'm glad we mentioned it before. I like that Donald Pleasence gave the suggestion that Loomis isn't surprised. I think that was just a great, because honestly, that would be my first instinct as well, as to, he should be surprised that he got up, like, oh my gosh, but he's not. And it's such a better idea, and it opens us up to definitely not just sequels or anything, but a better idea of Loomis's character and as a great protagonist.
Absolutely. Best scene, I'm going to pick one of Chad's mentionables for shot. I'm going to go with the closet scene as Michael struggles to get into the closet. He breaks through the louvers. Laurie is huddled in a corner, and it's a really terrifying moment. She grabs a hanger resourcefully, stabs him in the eye with it, which is a reason not to use plastic hangers. So, think about that. Michael drops his knife. Laurie picks up the knife, gives him a good stab. That's definitely my favorite scene there too. For me, it's the climax of the movie. And but I didn't mention this before, but I just thought when they wrote this, they actually came up with the kill scenes first. So it's a little bit like a James Bond movie where they come up with the stunts. So they thought of all the things that they wanted to do in the movie, and then they tied them together with a plot, which is kind of surprising when you think about it, because it all goes together so well. You would think that would be a weird way to write a movie, but...
Yeah, for slashers, those kill scenes are really important. Like Bob's being pinned against the wall. That's a cool kill.
That is a good kill. Yeah, absolutely. Best quote, Chad.
I think I'm going to steal everyone's. Maybe someone will surprise me here, but I've got to quote Dr. Sam Loomis. "I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding in even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked in. Because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil."
Oh, man. Nailed it. John, how about you?
Actually, I'm going with a little exchange here. It's just when Laurie says, was that the boogeyman? And Loomis replies, as a matter of fact, it was.
That's a wonderful line.
I've got another one that I'm going to get... Chad took mine, and so I'm just going to, for diversity's sake, give a nod to Brackett startles Laurie at one point, and he goes, "It's Halloween. Everyone's entitled to one good scare."
I figured we all might go with that first one, so... But, Russell, that was the other one I was considering having as my backup, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
It's more of a tip of the hat. Chad's was too good.
Yes.
Yeah, so change one thing.
I think for me, so Russell, you talked about this scene originally with Michael Myers behind her appearing. What follows after that, he misses a Laurie Strode that has her back turned to him, and it's kind of clumsy, and it's just an obvious miss. It's kind of goofy.
He gets her arm.
He does get her arm, but there's no reason to stab her arm in that situation. He had a clean shot.
So you want her to move suddenly to pull her away from it?
Yeah, I want something distracting like a toy fall or whatever. Even one of the kids saying, "Look out," just to make more sense.
Okay.
It's the only time Michael Myers seemed incompetent.
Okay. He'll seem more incompetent later. John, change one thing.
Well, honestly, there isn't a whole lot I could think of changing, but the only thing I could think of that when I watched it, I'm pretty good at having willing suspension of disbelief, but when she literally falls down like the stairs, like over the banister down the entire thing, I was like, maybe they ought to made her fall differently or not be as readily to get up. I was like, that would hurt a lot.
It would, but
If
your
not-
adrenaline, man. I mean,
broken bones.
I'd get up on a broken leg and run away from that guy. I'm on board with everything that happened. She also smashes through a broken, she breaks a glass French door with her hand, like to get out of like a rake propped up against it, and like again. These are not things that sound fun. You're like, if you told yourself, like, hey, break that glass window with your hand, you're like, and you hesitate before you hit, and you wouldn't actually do it. But if you got Michael Myers coming to murder you, again, murder your victim slow, serial killers. It's way scarier.
Yeah.
But if Michael Myers is walking your way, I'd bust through the glass with my hand too.
Well, I think that's a statement to really, at least in my mind, how little there is to change in this movie.
Yeah, and so my change one thing is I thought Bob's glasses on the ghost was a little too playful, and they really leaned into that one. So I mean, I don't know. My moment of disbelief was just like, your boyfriend's like a foot taller and has like giant, like fully grown man like shoulders, and like he's a very big strong man all of a sudden, and he's, I don't know. It's just, don't do the glasses sheet thing. Just I think it's actually scary if he just comes through the door and. Although you do lose the funny line of like, see anything you like.
Yeah, and that line, so PJ Souls was at a screening, and during that line when it came up, Kyes shouted out in the theater, "Heck yeah, I do!" And she was sitting right behind him, and she was actually flattered by the comment and
I was
laughed.
gonna say, that would make me feel good. I don't know. I'm a dude, so maybe I don't get that. But yeah. I realize now that I forgot to do the recast. Going back a few, Chad, recast.
So everyone did a very, very good job here. I may consider casting, if we're doing time appropriate, Jane Seymour in the role of Annie. She was actually closer in age to a teenager than Nancy was.
I'm always in favor of using Jane Seymour.
Yeah, me too.
She's a foxy lady.
If we're talking modern day, though, I know we've been ragging on him all night, but Danielle Harris, who was in the newest version of Halloween, Rob Zombies, she actually was in Halloween 4 as well. She did an excellent job as Annie, so she was wonderful.
Okay. John, do a recast for us.
Well, actually, I'm kind of stealing this one from reality, because at least according to PJ Souls, is that her then husband Dennis Quaid was in line to possibly play Bob Sims, and it had a scheduling conflict. But Dennis Quaid could have made that role a lot more memorable.
You took it right from me. I'm going to go after Bob. I don't know. What about Bob? But I just am not a fan of this character. So as John mentioned, it's John Michael Graham, and Bob is Linda's boyfriend. Again, the guy who ends up eventually putting his ghost sheet over his head. In fairness, he gets a great kill scene. So, so good moment there. So, Chad, before we go, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I saw the movie Hellfest. It's got a terrible name. It just seems like it's going to be this try-hard movie. But you know what? It is a blast, and I really recommend everyone see it if you enjoy slasher films like Halloween. It takes place at a horror festival. That's a perfect setting for a serial killer to hunt down his victims. Everyone thinks it's part of the act. No one's really responding. It's really kind of a brilliant setting without drawing too much attention to his actions. Bex Taylor Klaus is in it. She plays Sin in Arrow briefly. She's also in MTV's Scream as Audrey. She's a lot of fun. She plays kind of the same character. But you know what? The haunted house attractions, the kills, just the overall setting and the ending, it's a wonderful time.
Did Sarah like it?
Sarah did not see it.
Well, interestingly enough, my niece went and saw this movie and did not give me nearly the rundown you did, but she said she liked it, recommended it, and I also know that she likes the Bye Bye Man, so I just kind of dismissed it. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Well, thanks for that plug. Let's conclude this by giving this a 5-star. Or sorry, well, I may have showed my hand there a little bit just now. Would you, on a scale of 1 to 5 or 0 to 5? I always say 1 to 5. Why do I do that? Anyway, 5-star scale. Chad.
Oh, this is without a doubt a 5-star movie for me. It sets the template for what a slasher should be. You show the killer in the beginning, his powers. You kind of go after the dumb, distracted teenagers. It's just great from start to finish.
Does it hold up?
Absolutely. 5 stars. Great to this day.
That's a very fair assessment. John, how about you?
Yeah, it takes a lot typically for me to give 5 stars, but yes, this has to have 5 stars. It is genre defining, but even to me more than that is just, especially in doing more research on it, it's like how much they did with so little and how much effort and heart and soul was put into this to make it what it was. Is just fascinating to me. And I love hearing stories of something like that coming together just out of sheer will almost.
Yeah.
And I believe it does hold up. Even though IMDb and, Rotten Tomatoes audiences don't seem to.
It's over. It's 89%. I mean, that's pretty good. One thing, Chad, you didn't mention this earlier. I know you have a top 100 horror movies countdown, which, if you know me, I love my countdowns. I gotta know, where is Halloween on your top horror movies?
This is number 3 for me. It is behind my favorite horror movie ever, which is the original Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's My Guy, and then Dawn of the Dead. I love Dawn of the Dead. Honestly, Halloween is the better put together movie, but it's just how those movies affected me.
That's fair. And it's your personal countdown. That's what's important to remember. I'm also going to give this a 5 stars. I think I've been gushing about this all night long. So it's no mystery. This one, it's really hard to actually scare people. And this movie scares me at a rate of much greater than once every 10 minutes. It holds me on the edge of my seat for the entire ride. There are bits of humor in there that are intentional, that help only to pull you out of the mood, to just set you back up and to put you right back on the edge again. It's masterfully made. I love it. It 100% holds up now. I think there's a lot of really great horror movies that are starting to come out again in the last 5 years or so, maybe 10 years now. But we've re-entered another glory era for horror movies. But I think this is kind of the late era, like late age for the first golden age of horror movies, and this is an absolute crown jewel for it. And as I mentioned, I like my countdowns too. I have a top 100 horror movies, and this is at my number 4. So I have it one lower than Chad. I'll save what the other ones are for future episodes maybe, but that's just a tease. So thank you so much, Chad. John, are you ready to pick a movie for next time?
I am.
We pride ourselves in doing a lot of different kinds of movies, but not this time. We're going to lean into it. It's October. It's time to soil our pants and to scare ourselves again. What are we going to do it with this time? Option 1, The Mist from 2007. A freak storm unleashes a species of bloodthirsty creatures on a small town where a small band of citizens hole up in a supermarket to fight for their lives. Option 2, The Blair Witch Project from 1999. 3 students vanish after traveling into a Maryland forest and to film a documentary on the local Blair Witch legend, leaving only their found footage behind. Option 3, Reanimator from 1985. A dedicated student at a medical college and his girlfriend become involved in a bizarre set of experiments centering around the reanimation of dead tissue when an odd student arrives on campus. John? Chad,
Ooh,
why don't you talk this one out together here?
I've actually seen 2 of the 3 of these very recently. Just saw Reanimator for the first time. That was a lot of fun. Owen recommended it to me. Blair Witch is still, it's Blair Witch.
John, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've seen all of them, and I haven't seen any of them for a while, and that's interesting. But I think I'd kind of like to take it a little different feel than this. So I think we got to try The Mist on this one.
I like it. We went old before. We'll go new this time. So 2007, still within our 10-year rule. And next time we will go into The Mist. Not The Fog by John Carpenter, but The Mist. So, Chad, thank you so much for joining us. We really enjoyed having you here. I think you held up your end of the bargain for being a thoroughly fan of horror movies. He wore this darn spoiler t-shirt again, and I'm trying my hardest to not look at him. It has all these endings of movies. Is Halloween on there?
It is not.
Thank you.
Village is.
Michael Myers gets up and walks away. Should not be on your shirt. I'm glad it's not. So, and I didn't mention this along the way, but if anybody enjoys this so much, actually Halloween 2 is a pretty decent sequel, and it picks up immediately where this movie left off. And so check that one out too. And you could stop. You could stop after that.
Oh, I love 3. It's a different movie, but it's great.
It is. Carpenter had an idea of an anthology, but also for anyone who plans on seeing the new 2018 film Halloween. From what I understand, it takes place. Do not listen to anything after the first movie.
That's
they
right.
act like 2, and the rest of them don't exist.
It retcons everything else.
Can't wait for it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much. John, thanks as always for joining me. Chad as well. We'll certainly have you back on again anytime you would like. And reminder to everybody out there, please give us a rating on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. Give us a like on Facebook. Reach out to us on Retro Movie Roundtable at yahoo.com. We love to hear from you, and we love to engage with you. As always, thanks for listening. Be good to each other, and watch more movies. John?
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Do you want to reach out to your favorite podcast, Retro Movie Roundtable? Yeah! Well, now you can. Simply go to iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a rating and review.
Wow! I didn't know it was so easy. It took me less than 60 seconds.
That's right. It's easy. Also, you can follow along and interact with the growing Retro Movie Roundtable community by liking Retro Movie Roundtable on Facebook.
Facebook? Wow! Even my parents can use Facebook.
That's right, Timmy. And if you want to write in to John and Russell, you can also write them at an email at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com.
I never knew it was so easy to reach out to Retro Movie Roundtable.
It is easy, and it helps the podcast gain viewers and grow their community of movie lovers. So, remember, reach out to Retro Movie Roundtable and let them know what you think of them.